I woke at 2 in the morning to use the bathroom in my son's house in suburban Dallas, Texas. As I passed the master bedroom, I heard my daughter-in-law Carol's voice through the cracked door, whispering urgently on the phone. The words froze my blood. "Tomorrow we'll lock her away. The facility is ready. She signed the papers last week, remember? She was so confused she didn't even read them. By noon tomorrow, she'll be gone and we'll have everything." I stood paralyzed, my heart hammering, realizing my own son Timothy was in on this. I walked back to the guest bedroom as silently as possible, my legs shaking so badly I thought they might give out beneath me. My mind was racing, spinning through everything that had happened over the past 3 months since I'd moved in with Timothy and Carol after my fall. I sat on the edge of the bed in the darkness, trying to steady my breathing. The hip fracture had happened back in July. I'd slipped on a wet floor in my own kitchen in Austin, and the pain had been immediate and severe. Timothy had driven down that same day, insisting I couldn't stay alone anymore. At 67 years old, recovering from a broken hip, I'd need help. It made sense at the time. He was my son. I trusted him completely. Now, sitting in that guest bedroom at 2:15 in the morning, everything from the past 3 months suddenly made terrible sense. Carol had been so attentive with my medications. She'd bring them to me 3 times a day, always watching to make sure I swallowed each pill. She'd smile and pat my hand and tell me how important it was to take everything exactly as prescribed. But I'd been feeling increasingly foggy. My thoughts would drift. I'd forget conversations we'd just had. Some days felt like I was moving through thick water. Timothy had brought home paperwork several times, spreading it across the kitchen table while I sat there feeling dizzy and confused. Insurance forms, he'd said. Medicare updates. Things I needed to sign. I'd signed them, trusting him, barely able to focus on the words that swam before my eyes. Their lawyer friend Stuart had visited at least 4 times. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a briefcase full of documents. Each time, more papers to sign. Timothy would guide my hand. "Just here, Mom. And here. This is just routine, for your protection." Carol had been talking to my sister Jessica, telling her I was declining. That I was getting paranoid, saying strange things, accusing them of moving my belongings when I simply couldn't remember where I'd put them. Jessica's calls had become less frequent. When we did talk, she'd speak to me the way you'd speak to a confused child. The neighbors had heard the same story. "Poor Brigitte. She's not doing well. The dementia is progressing. We're doing our best to care for her." But I wasn't confused. Not really. I was being drugged. 2 weeks ago, I'd been looking for stamps in Timothy's home office. I'd opened desk drawers until I found a manila folder labeled Mother's Affairs. Inside were documents that had made my stomach turn. I'd pulled out my phone with shaking hands and photographed every page before carefully putting the folder back exactly as I'd found it. At the time, I'd told myself there must be some explanation. Some reason these papers existed. I'd pushed it from my mind, not wanting to believe what I'd seen. Now I understood. Those photos on my phone might be the only thing that could save me. I moved quickly but quietly, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain they'd hear it downstairs. I pulled my small suitcase from the closet and packed clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. My purse was hanging on the back of the door. I grabbed it, checking inside. Driver's license, credit cards, and $300 in cash I'd withdrawn weeks ago, for reasons I couldn't quite remember now. Maybe some part of me had known even then that something was wrong. My car keys. Timothy had told me my Toyota Camry was in the shop, that the transmission was acting up and it would be there for a while. But last week, when I'd walked through their garage to take out the trash, I'd seen it parked there. When I'd mentioned it to Timothy, he'd looked irritated and said I was misremembering. The car in the garage was Carol's old vehicle. Mine was still in the shop, but I knew my own car. I'd driven that silver Camry for 8 years. I crept down the stairs, gripping the railing, praying the wood wouldn't creak. Every sound felt amplified in the darkness. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock in the hallway. In the kitchen, I saw Carol's purse on the counter. Papers were sticking out of the top. I pulled out my phone and photographed them quickly, the camera flash seeming bright as a spotlight. My hands were trembling. The papers showed a commitment order from Pinewood Mental Health Facility. My name was typed at the top. The admission was scheduled for 10 o'clock this morning. In less than 8 hours, they were planning to have me locked away. I found the spare car key in the junk drawer where Timothy always kept it. Then I moved into the garage, easing the door closed behind me as slowly as possible. The Camry sat there in the shadows. I got in, put it in neutral, and let it roll backward down the driveway before starting the engine on the street. As I drove away, checking my rearview mirror obsessively every few seconds, I pulled over under a streetlight 3 blocks away. My whole body was shaking. I needed to look at those photos more carefully. I pulled them up on my phone, zooming in on the documents I'd just photographed from Carol's purse. The commitment papers were bad enough, but there was more. A power of attorney document dated 2 weeks ago, bearing my signature. It gave Timothy complete control over my finances, my house, my retirement accounts, everything I owned. I had no memory of signing it, but the signature looked exactly like mine. And then I saw the bank statements. Transfers from my checking account to an account in Timothy and Carol's names. $43,000, $68,000, $92,000. The transfers went back 6 weeks, transaction after transaction. The total was over $400,000. They'd been systematically draining my accounts while keeping me too drugged to notice or question anything. I sat in my car at a gas station under the fluorescent lights, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The son I'd raised alone after his father died of a heart attack when Timothy was just 12 years old. The boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college. The man I'd trusted with my life, he'd been stealing from me, planning to lock me away. And I'd signed documents giving him permission to do all of it, while I was too foggy from whatever drugs they were feeding me to understand what was happening. The betrayal felt like a physical weight on my chest. But underneath the grief and shock, something else was building. A cold, hard anger. I wasn't going to let them do this. I wasn't going to disappear into some facility while they lived off my money. I was going to fight back. But first, I needed help. I drove to the nearest police station, following the GPS on my phone through empty streets. It was 4:30 in the morning, and Dallas was still mostly asleep. The station was a low brick building with fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and sterile. Inside, a woman officer sat behind a glass partition. Her nameplate read Officer Janet Harris. She looked up as I approached, taking in my rumpled clothes and frightened expression. "I need to report a crime," I said. My voice sounded thin and scared even to my own ears. Officer Harris motioned me to sit down and pulled out a form. "What kind of crime, ma'am?" I told her everything. About Carol's phone call, about the drugs, about the commitment papers, and the power of attorney I didn't remember signing, about the bank accounts being drained. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken. She looked at each one carefully, her expression neutral and professional. "These are serious allegations," she said. "You're saying your son and daughter-in-law have been drugging you and stealing your money?" "Yes, and they're planning to have me committed this morning." I heard Carol on the phone. By noon today, I was supposed to be locked away in Pinewood Mental Health Facility. I barely got out. Officer Harris made notes on her form, asking questions about dates and amounts and names. She seemed sympathetic. She asked if I had any other family, anyone who could verify my story. I told her about my sister Jessica, but explained that Carol had already poisoned that relationship by telling her I was mentally declining. "Let me make copies of these photos," Officer Harris said, taking my phone. "And I need to check something in our system. I'll be right back." She disappeared through a door behind the partition. I sat in the hard plastic chair, my exhaustion finally catching up with me. My hip ached. I hadn't slept. I was running on pure adrenaline and fear. 15 minutes passed. When Officer Harris came back, her entire demeanor had changed. She was formal now, careful, watching me with a different kind of attention. "Mrs. Patterson," she said slowly, "I need to tell you something. There's already a missing person report filed on you. It was filed yesterday evening at 7 o'clock by your son Timothy." My stomach dropped. "What?" "According to the report, you suffer from advancing dementia. You've stopped taking your medications and become paranoid, believing family members are stealing from you. The report states, you're a danger to yourself, and you need immediate medical attention. There's also documentation from your physician, Dr. Raymond Foster, detailing your mental decline over the past 3 months." "I've never heard of Dr. Raymond Foster," I said. "I don't have a doctor here. My doctor is in Austin, Dr. Margaret Flynn. I've been seeing her for 20 years. Officer Harris looked at me with something like pity. Mrs. Patterson, I understand this is difficult, but many people with dementia don't recognize their own condition. The power of attorney you showed me is a legal document. Those bank transfers were authorized transactions with proper documentation. Without clear evidence of fraud or coercion, there's nothing the police can do about legally authorized financial transactions. But I didn't authorize them. I was drugged. They forged my signature. Do you have any proof you were drugged? Any toxicology reports? No. How could I? I didn't know what was happening until tonight. Officer Harris sighed. Look, I understand you're upset, but from a legal standpoint, everything appears to be in order. Your family has gone through proper legal channels. They've filed the appropriate paperwork. They're worried about you. They're stealing from me, I said, my voice rising. They're planning to lock me away. You have to help me. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to need to call your son and let him know you're safe. It's protocol when we have a missing vulnerable adult. No, please. I stood up, panic flooding through me. If you call him, he'll take me to that facility. You'll be helping them. Officer Harris reached for her phone. Ma'am, please sit down. Just then, another call came through on her radio. Robbery in progress, 2 blocks north. Shots fired. The station suddenly erupted into activity. Officers were moving, grabbing equipment, heading for vehicles. Officer Harris stood up, torn between her duty to respond and her situation with me. In the chaos, I walked out. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even noticed. I got into my car and drove away, my hands shaking on the wheel. Now, I knew how bad this really was. They'd already built a complete legal framework around me. I'd been declared mentally incompetent, missing, and vulnerable. Going to any authority would just result in me being returned to Timothy or committed to Pinewood. The system was designed to protect vulnerable elderly people, but in my case, that same system was working against me. They'd manipulated it perfectly. As I drove aimlessly through Dallas in the growing dawnlight, my phone started ringing. Timothy. I let it ring. He called again. Then Carol called. Then the text messages started flooding in. Mom, where are you? We're so worried about you. Please come home. You're not well. You need help. We love you. We just want to take care of you. Each message felt sinister now. Each expression of concern was a lie designed to lure me back. I needed help, but who could I trust? Then I thought of Linda Patterson, my best friend from high school. We'd known each other for 50 years. Linda lived in Fort Worth, about 40 minutes away. We hadn't talked in months because Carol had said Linda was a bad influence, encouraging me to be too independent when I needed to accept help. Carol had discouraged the friendship, and I'd let it fade. Now I wondered if that had been intentional, isolating me from anyone who might question what was happening. Linda was my only hope. If anyone would believe me, it would be her. I arrived at Linda's house just after 6:30 in the morning. She lived in a small brick ranch house with flower beds along the front walk. I'd been there dozens of times over the years, back when we used to meet regularly for coffee and conversation. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart pounding. When Linda opened the door, her face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, confusion, and then concern. Brigitte? My God, what are you doing here? Come in, come in. She pulled me inside and wrapped me in a hug. I felt myself start to cry, all the fear and exhaustion pouring out. Linda guided me to her couch and sat beside me, holding my hand. What happened? You look terrible. Are you all right? I told her everything. The whole story poured out of me. Carol's phone call in the night, the documents I'd found, the police station, all of it. I showed her the photos on my phone. Linda looked at each one, her expression growing more horrified. Oh, honey, she said. This is awful. This is absolutely awful. You believe me? Of course I believe you. I know you, Brigitte. You're not confused or senile. And this, she gestured at the phone, this is evidence. This is real. Relief washed over me so powerfully I felt dizzy. Thank God. I thought I was going crazy. The police didn't believe me. They said Timothy filed a missing person report claiming I have dementia. Linda made coffee and brought me toast. We sat at her kitchen table, and she listened while I explained everything in more detail. Then we started making plans. Linda suggested we contact her nephew, who practiced family law in Austin. We'd get the power of attorney revoked, investigate the transfers, build a case against Timothy and Carol. For the first time since fleeing Timothy's house, I felt hope. We spent the morning working out details. Linda let me take a shower and gave me clean clothes. She made phone calls while I rested on her couch, finally allowing myself to relax slightly. I had an ally. I wasn't alone. At 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Linda answered it. I heard voices in the hallway, male and female, professional sounding. Then Linda came back into the living room, and my heart stopped. Timothy and Carol stood behind her, and they'd brought 2 other people. A woman in a dark blue suit who introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Welsh from Pinewood Mental Health Facility, and a man named Howard from Adult Protective Services. Linda's face showed confusion and concern as she looked at me. "Brigitte, honey, these people are here to help you." "No," I said, standing up. "Linda, no, don't listen to them." But Timothy was already talking, his voice full of concern and barely contained emotion. "Linda, thank you so much for calling us right away. We've been out of our minds with worry. When we woke up this morning and found Mom gone, we didn't know what to think." Linda called them. She'd called Timothy. My best friend had turned me in. Timothy moved closer to me, but I backed away. He looked at Linda instead, speaking loudly enough that I could hear every word. This has been going on for months now. The paranoia, the false accusations, the erratic behavior. Last night, Mom snuck out while we were sleeping. We've been terrified something would happen to her. Dr. Welsh stepped forward, her voice gentle and professional. "Mrs. Patterson, I've been working with your family to help coordinate your care. I understand you're frightened, but we only want to help you." She showed Linda official-looking medical records, patient history forms, progress notes documenting my supposed mental decline over months. Every symptom of dementia carefully listed. Confusion, paranoia, memory loss, erratic behavior, accusations against family members. Howard from Adult Protective Services had court orders. Everything looked legitimate, professional, heartbreaking. Linda sat down heavily in a chair, looking between me and Timothy. "Brigitte," she said gently, "I think they're right. I think you need help." I tried to show her the photos again, pulling up my phone. "Linda, look at these, the bank statements. They've stolen over $400,000 from me." But now the evidence looked different through the lens of mental illness. A confused woman having delusions about theft. A paranoid elderly person making wild accusations. Linda held my hand and spoke in that terrible, pitying voice people use with children and the mentally ill. "You're going to get help, sweetie. These nice people are going to take care of you." When Dr. Welsh and Howard moved to take my arms, to guide me toward their car, something inside me snapped. I pulled away and ran. I ran through Linda's living room, through her kitchen, out the back door into her yard. Behind me, I heard shouting. Timothy and Howard were chasing me. I ran through Linda's backyard, my hips screaming in pain. Through a gap in the fence, through a neighbor's yard. Their dog barked frantically. I heard feet pounding behind me. I made it to the side street where I'd parked my Camry, fumbled with the keys, got the door open. Timothy and Howard were crossing the neighbor's lawn as I started the engine. I stepped on the gas and drove away, checking my mirror to see them standing in the street. Timothy had his phone out. He was calling someone, probably the police, reporting a mentally ill woman driving erratically in a silver Toyota Camry. I was a fugitive now. My best friend had betrayed me. Even she believed their lies. As I drove, the full horror of the situation settled over me. They'd created a perfect trap. Every move I made to defend myself looked like the behavior of someone having a mental breakdown. Running from help, making wild accusations about theft, acting paranoid. The more I struggled to prove I was sane, the crazier I appeared. And I understood now that this was exactly what they'd planned. Every element designed to make me look unstable while they looked like concerned family members trying to help a declining loved one. If I went to authorities, they'd see a confused elderly woman who'd run away from her caretakers. If I tried to fight the power of attorney, I'd be fighting as someone already declared incompetent. If I protested being committed, it would be seen as lack of insight into my own condition, a classic symptom of dementia. They'd built a cage around me, made of legal documents and false medical records, and carefully crafted reputation. And the harder I fought against it, the more trapped I became. I spent the rest of the day driving aimlessly through the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, too afraid to stop anywhere for long. Every police car I saw made my heart race. Every time someone looked at me, I wondered if they'd seen the silver alert that must be broadcasting my description by now. By late afternoon, exhausted and desperate, I made a decision. I needed to check my bank accounts to see exactly how bad the financial damage was. I parked behind a public library and used their Wi-Fi on my phone. When I logged into my primary checking account, the balance showed $17.32. My savings account showed $42.08. I stared at the numbers, feeling sick. My retirement account wouldn't load at all. The screen just showed an error message. I called the bank's customer service line, my hands shaking. The representative who answered was polite and professional. After verifying my identity with my social security number and date of birth, she explained the situation in careful, sympathetic tones. "Mrs. Patterson, I show that there's a power of attorney on file for your accounts. A Mr. Timothy Hart has full authorization. There have been several large transfers over the past 6 weeks, all properly authorized." "How much?" I asked. "How much total was transferred?" "Let me check." There was typing in the background. "From your checking and savings accounts, approximately $437,000 has been transferred to a joint account with Mr. Hart. Your retirement account was closed 3 weeks ago, and the full balance of $193,000 was transferred as well. $630,000. They'd taken $630,000 that I'd saved over 40 years of working as a school administrator. Gone. "There must be some mistake," I said. "I never authorized those transfers. Can you reverse them?" "Ma'am, the transfers were all completed with proper authorization under the power of attorney. I'm showing a note on your account indicating a medical hold due to diminished capacity. For any changes or disputes, you'd need to work with Mr. Hart or provide documentation removing the power of attorney. But he's the one stealing from me." There was a pause. "Ma'am, I understand this is frustrating, but from a banking standpoint, everything was done correctly and legally. You'd need to address this through legal channels. Perhaps speaking with your family member would help clear up any confusion." She thought I was confused, just like everyone else. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my car behind the library and did the math. I had $300 in cash. I had credit cards, but using them would immediately show Timothy my location. I had a car with half a tank of gas. That was everything I owned now. I bought a prepaid phone at a drugstore, paying with cash. I transferred all the important photos from my regular phone to the new one, then took out the SIM card from my old phone and destroyed it. If they were tracking me through my phone, that would end now. That night, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot. I reclined the seat as far as it would go and tried to rest, but I woke at every sound. At 3 a.m, a security guard knocked on my window and told me I couldn't sleep there. I drove to a truck stop, parked among the big rigs, and tried again. I got maybe 2 hours of sleep. The next day, I knew I needed a lawyer. Someone who could help me fight the power of attorney, get my money back, stop the commitment order. I found a library with computers and searched for attorneys specializing in elder law and financial abuse. I called 6 different law firms. The conversations all followed the same pattern. I'd explain my situation. They'd sound interested and sympathetic. Then I'd mention that I had no money because my son had drained my accounts, and that he had power of attorney over my assets. The interest would fade. They'd politely explain that fighting a power of attorney case required significant funds for court costs and expert witnesses. And frankly, if there was documentation of mental incapacity, cases like mine were very difficult to win. One lawyer was more honest than the others. "Ma'am," she said gently, "I'm sorry, but without funds for representation and with the legal framework already established against you, I don't see how you could win this case. My advice would be to try to reconcile with your family. Reconcile with the people trying to lock me away and steal everything I owned." That was the professional advice. By the 3rd day, I was living in my car full-time. I rationed my dwindling cash, eating dollar menu items from fast food restaurants. I hadn't showered. My clothes were wrinkled and dirty. I looked exactly like what Timothy and Carol claimed I was, a confused, unstable, elderly woman who needed help. That night, parked behind an abandoned building, I sat in my car and cried. I'd hit absolute bottom. I had evidence of crimes, but I was powerless to use it. I was homeless, nearly broke, and declared mentally incompetent. The authorities wouldn't help me. Lawyers wouldn't take my case. My own best friend had turned me in to my abusers. I thought about just giving up, walking into a police station and letting whatever happened happen. Maybe Pinewood wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I'd get meals and a bed. Maybe fighting was pointless. Then I pulled out my phone and looked through the photos again. Not the power of attorney or bank statements this time. I looked at images I'd taken from that manila folder in Timothy's office, but hadn't examined carefully in my panic. One photo showed a document that made me stop breathing. It was a spreadsheet. The title at the top read Project Eldercare. Below that was a list of names. Margaret Dunlap, Robert Chen, Dorothy Sawyer, Elizabeth Martinez, Harold Jennings, and 8 more names I didn't recognize. 13 names total, not including mine. Next to each name were columns. Date of contact, estimated assets, status, completion date, amount recovered. Margaret Dunlap's entry showed $420,000 recovered, with a completion date from 8 months ago. Status, complete. Subject committed. Accounts drained. House sold. Robert Chen showed $600,000 estimated. Status, in progress. Commitment scheduled March. Dorothy Sawyer, $530,000, complete. Currently at Pinewood. The entries went on. Every single person had been targeted, drained, and either committed to facilities or deceased. At the bottom of the spreadsheet was my own name, Brigitte Patterson. Estimated assets, $650,000. Timeline, 3 months. Status, proceeding as planned. I stared at the document on my phone screen, my mind reeling. This wasn't just about me. Timothy and Carol had done this before. Multiple times. They'd been running a systematic operation, targeting elderly people, gaining their trust, drugging them, getting power of attorney, draining their assets, and having them committed to institutions where they'd be forgotten. It was organized elder abuse on a massive scale. And I had the evidence right here on my phone. But what could I do with it? I was homeless and branded mentally unstable. Who would believe me? I sat in my car, staring at that spreadsheet until my eyes burned. 13 names, 13 people who'd been victimized, the same way I was being victimized. Some were dead. Others were locked away in facilities. And I was supposed to be number 14. For the first time in days, I felt something besides fear and despair. I felt purpose. If I couldn't save myself through normal channels, maybe I could save myself by exposing the entire operation. These weren't just crimes against me. This was conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud on a massive scale. That had to mean something. I needed to verify the information on that spreadsheet. I needed to find these victims and document the pattern. If I could prove Timothy and Carol had done this to multiple people, maybe someone would have to listen. Over the next 3 days, I practically lived in public libraries, using their computers to research. I was careful, moving between different locations, paying with cash when I needed to print documents or buy food. Margaret Dunlap had an obituary from 8 months ago. She died at Pinewood Mental Health Facility at age 73. The obituary said she was survived by no one. No children, no siblings, no close family. A small life reduced to 3 paragraphs. I wondered if she'd been drugged and confused like me, if she'd died alone and frightened. Dorothy Sawyer was listed in Pinewood's online facility directory as a long-term resident. I found an old Facebook profile that hadn't been updated in over a year. Her last post talked about meeting some wonderful new friends who were helping her with financial planning after her husband died. Elizabeth Martinez was also at Pinewood. Her profile showed a woman who'd owned a small restaurant in Austin before retirement. The restaurant's Facebook page had gone silent 9 months ago. 3 others on the list were deceased. 2 more were in facilities. Several I couldn't find any information about, which worried me even more. Every single person who was committed was at Pinewood Mental Health Facility, the same place where I was supposed to have been taken, the same place where Dr. Patricia Welsh was director. I researched Pinewood and found what looked like a standard nursing home and mental health facility website. caring staff, comfortable rooms, specialized memory care. But reading between the lines, understanding what I now knew, it looked sinister. A place where people were sent to be forgotten while their assets were stripped away. On the fourth day after I'd fled Linda's house, I was back at the library when a news alert popped up on the computer. I almost didn't click on it, but the words "Silver Alert" caught my attention. The story was about me. A silver alert issued for a missing endangered elderly woman named Bridget Patterson, last seen 4 days ago in the Dallas area. My driver's license photo stared back at me from the screen. The report said I suffered from severe dementia and might be confused and disoriented. I was potentially driving a silver Toyota Camry. Then the video cut to an interview with Timothy. He stood in front of his house, his face carefully arranged in grief and worry. "My mother has been struggling with declining mental health for some time," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "We've been trying to get her the help she needs, but she's frightened and confused. If anyone sees her, please call the police immediately. We just want her home safe." He looked like a devoted son, worried about his sick mother. No one watching would see anything but genuine concern. I felt sick looking at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. Now everyone was looking for me. I couldn't go anywhere public without risking being recognized. The elderly woman living in her car behind the abandoned building wasn't just homeless anymore. She was a wanted person, endangered, confused, someone to be reported and returned to her family. That night was the lowest point. I parked in an alley behind an old warehouse, hungry and exhausted and utterly defeated. I had evidence of massive crimes on my phone, but I was too powerless to use it. I'd been systematically destroyed, and they'd done it so cleverly that my own attempts to defend myself made me look more unstable. I thought about just turning myself in, walking into a police station. Maybe Pinewood would at least be warm. Maybe they'd feed me. I was so tired of fighting. My prepaid phone rang. I'd only given the number to one person, the library IT specialist, who'd helped me navigate some of the research databases. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was a wrong number. But something made me pick up. A woman's voice came through, urgent and intense. "Is this Brigitte? Please tell me this is Brigitte Patterson." "Who is this?" I asked. "My name is Ellen Sawyer. I'm Dorothy Sawyer's daughter, and I've been looking for you for 2 days straight." I sat up in my car, my heart suddenly racing. "How did you find me?" Ellen talked fast, her words tumbling over each other. "I've been investigating my mother's commitment to Pinewood for 2 months. Something wasn't right about it. Mom was functioning perfectly fine, and then suddenly she was declared incompetent and committed. Money started disappearing from her accounts. When I tried to visit her, they said she was too unstable for visitors. So I hired a private investigator." "A private investigator?" "Yes. His name is Marcus Webb. He found a pattern. Multiple elderly people, all connected somehow to the same family, Timothy and Carol Hart. Financial exploitation, questionable commitments, all ending up at Pinewood. Your name came up as the next target. When I saw the silver alert, I knew we had to find you before they did." "How did you get this number?" "Marcus is good at what he does. We got a list of every prepaid phone number purchased in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in the past week. I've been calling them all, one by one. I've made almost 200 calls. You're the first person who's actually been Brigitte." "You believe me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You believe this is really happening?" "Of course I believe you. It happened to my mother, and I'm going to help you stop them." For the first time in days, I wasn't alone. Ellen and I met in person the next morning in a park in Fort Worth, far from Timothy's neighborhood. She was in her mid-40s, with short dark hair and the sharp, focused energy of someone running on determination and coffee. She brought her private investigator, Marcus Webb, a former police detective who'd gone into private practice. I showed them everything on my phone, the spreadsheet, the bank statements, the commitment papers, all of it. Marcus went through each photo methodically, taking his own pictures of my screen, making notes. "This is good," he said. "This is really good. This spreadsheet is the key. It shows premeditation and pattern. Combined with the financial records and the other victims, we can build a case." Ellen explained what she'd already done. After her mother was committed, she'd started asking questions that no one wanted to answer. Why couldn't she visit? Why weren't her calls returned? Why had her mother's entire savings disappeared? She'd hired Marcus 3 weeks ago, and he'd uncovered the pattern connecting multiple victims to Timothy and Carol. "The problem is proof," Marcus said. "We have victims, but most of them are either dead or locked in Pinewood where they can't testify. The families have been told their loved ones are mentally ill. The financial transactions all look legal on paper because of the powers of attorney. We need something that directly connects Timothy and Carol to fraud, to the drugging, to the conspiracy with Pinewood." "What about Dr. Welsh?" I asked. "She's the director of Pinewood, and she came with Timothy to Linda's house. She's clearly involved." Marcus nodded. "That's our angle. If we can prove Pinewood is participating in this scheme, accepting patients they know are being exploited, we can bring down the whole operation. But we need more evidence." Over the next 5 days, I stayed in a small rental property Ellen owned, finally safe and warm. Marcus conducted his investigation, tracking financial records, interviewing families of victims, building the case piece by piece. He discovered that Timothy and Carol hadn't just done this in Texas. They'd operated in 3 states over 7 years. The full victim count was at least 23 people. The total amount stolen was over $8 million. It was organized, systematic elder fraud and abuse on a scale that shocked even Marcus, who'd seen plenty in his years as a detective. "We need to take this to the FBI," he finally said. "This crosses state lines. It's organized crime. Local police don't have the resources or jurisdiction for something this big." Ellen arranged a meeting with FBI agent Richard Coleman, who handled financial crimes. We met in his office, and I told my story while Marcus presented the evidence. Agent Coleman, a man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes, listened without interrupting. When we finished, he sat back in his chair. "This is one of the most extensive elder fraud cases I've seen," he said. "But building a prosecutable case will be challenging. Most of the victims can't testify. The financial transactions have legal cover through the powers of attorney. We need direct evidence of the conspiracy. We need them to incriminate themselves." "What are you suggesting?" Ellen asked. Agent Coleman looked at me. "Mrs. Patterson would need to wear a wire and confront them directly. If we can get them to admit on tape what they've been doing, we'll have what we need." The room fell silent. Everyone looked at me. "It's dangerous," Agent Coleman continued. "If they suspect you're recording, things could get violent. We'll have agents nearby, ready to move in immediately. But there is risk." I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. "I'll do it." We planned carefully over the next 2 days. I'd go to Timothy's house and confront them, trying to get them to explain their scheme on tape. Ellen would be in a surveillance van nearby with FBI agents, listening to the audio feed. More agents would be positioned around the house, ready to enter at the first sign of danger. They fitted me with 2 recording devices. One was obvious, built into a button on my shirt. The other was smaller, hidden in the lining of my jacket. Agent Coleman explained that sophisticated criminals sometimes check for wires. If Timothy found the first one, he might not look for a second. The day of the confrontation, I was terrified but determined. I'd been through too much to back down now. Ellen hugged me before I got in my car. "You're incredibly brave," she said. "I'm incredibly angry," I replied. "There's a difference." I drove to Timothy's house in suburban Dallas, the same house I'd fled from 12 days ago. It felt like a lifetime. I parked in the driveway and walked to the front door, knowing that FBI agents were watching from unmarked vehicles down the street. Carol answered the door. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, then what looked like relief, then something calculating. She called for Timothy. He came to the door, and his performance was perfect. Tears, relief, concern. "Mom, thank God. We've been so worried. Please, come inside." They led me into the living room. The same living room where I'd sat dozens of times, drinking coffee and chatting, back when I'd believed my son loved me. I sat on the couch. Timothy and Carol sat across from me. I could feel the recording devices against my skin. "I know everything," I said. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this, about the other victims, the spreadsheet, Pinewood, Dr. Welsh, Stewart, all of it. I expected denials, confusion, more gaslighting. Instead, Timothy smiled. It was a cold smile I'd never seen before, and it transformed his face into something unfamiliar. "So you figured it out," he said. "I'm impressed, Mother. I honestly thought we'd dosed you enough that you'd never put it together." Carol laughed. It was a harsh sound. "You were supposed to be at Pinewood by now, safe and quiet and out of the way." Timothy leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and he talked. It was like he'd been waiting for this moment, waiting for someone to appreciate his cleverness. "It started 7 years ago," he explained. "Carol's father was in a nursing home, declining. We saw how easy it was to take control of his finances, how the system just trusted family members, how no one questioned anything, as long as you had the right paperwork. He had $200,000 in savings. We took all of it over 18 months, and nobody even noticed. We realized we could do it systematically," Carol added. "Find elderly people who were isolated, vulnerable, befriend them, gain their trust." Carol's background as a nurse meant she knew about medications, about facilities, about how to manipulate medical records. I recruited Stuart, who had gambling debts and needed money. Then we found Dr. Welsh at Pinewood. Her facility was struggling financially. We offered her a steady stream of long-term patients with no families asking questions. She'd accept them, keep them drugged and quiet, and we'd split the proceeds. "It was perfect," Timothy said. "We'd identify targets, usually widows or widowers with substantial assets and no close family. We'd build relationships, become trusted, get power of attorney while they were confused or medicated, transfer the assets systematically, then commit them to Pinewood before anyone noticed. Some died there. Others just lived out their days, too drugged to understand what had happened to them." I felt sick listening to him talk about it so casually. These were people's lives, people who trusted them. "And me?" I asked. "Your own mother?" Timothy's expression hardened. "You were just another mark, Mom. Maybe the easiest one. You trusted me completely, never questioned anything, signed whatever I put in front of you. By the time you started to figure it out, it was almost over. Another week and you'd have been gone." Carol leaned forward. "And you're still not going to do anything about it, Brigitte. You're still under a commitment order. You're still legally incompetent. You're still a confused, mentally ill woman who broke into her son's house making wild accusations. Who's going to believe you?" Suddenly, Carol was behind me, grabbing my arms. Stuart emerged from another room. I hadn't even known he was there. Timothy stood up, and he was holding a syringe. "Did you really think we wouldn't anticipate this?" Timothy asked, moving closer. "We found your wire." He reached out and ripped the button device from my shirt, crushing it under his foot. "We have a room prepared for you upstairs. We'll keep you sedated until Pinewood has an opening. You'll spend the rest of your life there, just like the others. And this time, there's no escape." Just as Carol started forcing me toward the stairs, the front door crashed open with a thunderous bang. FBI agents flooded in, guns drawn, shouting commands. "Freeze! FBI! Show me your hands!" Timothy dropped the syringe. Stuart tried to run for the back door but was tackled immediately. Carol released me and slowly raised her hands, her face shocked. Agent Coleman entered, gun drawn. "You're all under arrest. And for your information, she was wearing 2 wires. We heard everything." The second recording device in my jacket lining had captured it all. They handcuffed Timothy, Carol, and Stuart. Another team was simultaneously raiding Pinewood to arrest Dr. Welsh. It was over. I stood in the living room of my son's house, surrounded by FBI agents, and watched as Timothy was led away. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You should have just taken the pills and gone quietly," he said. I looked back at him, this stranger who'd once been my son. "No," I said. "I really shouldn't have." The weeks that followed were overwhelming. The FBI investigation expanded rapidly as more evidence came to light. They found documentation of 23 victims across 3 states. The financial fraud totaled over $8 million. The media coverage was extensive. Every news channel wanted to interview me. I declined most of them, still processing everything that had happened. I gave my testimony to the FBI multiple times, going through every detail. Other victims' families came forward. Ellen and I met several of them, sharing our stories, supporting each other through the process. The legal proceedings moved quickly given the strength of the evidence. The power of attorney documents were immediately invalidated. My assets were frozen pending recovery proceedings. Timothy and Carol were denied bail, held as flight risks. Dr. Welsh was arrested at Pinewood, and the facility was shut down pending investigation. Stewart tried to negotiate a plea deal but was denied. Ellen became my attorney, working to recover my stolen funds. It was a complicated process, tracing the money through various accounts and transactions. Timothy and Carol had spent some of it, buying a new car, taking expensive vacations, investing in property. But most of it was still traceable. Within 3 months, I'd recovered $570,000 of the $630,000 they'd stolen. The house I owned in Austin had never been sold. My retirement accounts were restored. I wasn't whole financially, but I was close. More importantly, I was free. The commitment order was void. All the false medical records were exposed as fraudulent. Dr. Raymond Foster, whose name had been used on those documents, didn't exist. It had all been fabricated. I met Dorothy Sawyer when she was released from Pinewood. She was 78, frail from a year of being over-medicated, but her mind was sharp once the drugs cleared her system. She hugged me and cried, thanking me for saving her. Watching her reunite with Ellen was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. 2 other victims who were still alive were freed from various facilities. The families of victims who died found closure, finally understanding what had really happened to their loved ones. The trial began 8 months after my escape from Timothy's house. The prosecution had an overwhelming amount of evidence. I testified, walking the jury through everything that had happened. I faced Timothy across the courtroom and told my story clearly and calmly. He showed no remorse, no emotion, just cold calculation even then. Carol broke first. She took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against the others in exchange for a reduced sentence. She detailed how they'd selected victims, how they'd manipulated medical records, how they'd coordinated with Dr. Welsh and Stewart. Her testimony was damning. The verdict came after only 6 hours of deliberation, guilty on all counts. Timothy was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. Dr. Welsh received 25 years. Stewart got 15 years. Carol, because of her cooperation, received 12 years. I felt no satisfaction watching my son be led away to prison. Just a deep, aching sadness for who he'd become and what he'd done. I moved back into my house in Austin. It felt strange at first, being back in the place where this had all started with my fall in the kitchen. But it was mine. I'd earned it, saved for it, and now I'd fought to keep it. I reconnected with my sister Jessica. She apologized through tears for believing Carol's lies, for not questioning more, for not being there when I needed her. I forgave her. The manipulation had been sophisticated and intentional. But I didn't just return to my old life. I couldn't. What I'd been through had changed me fundamentally. 3 months after the trial, I started a foundation called Elder Watch. Its mission was to protect elderly people from financial abuse and exploitation. We educated seniors about protecting their assets, recognizing manipulation, understanding their rights. We trained caregivers and facility staff to spot signs of abuse. We worked with banks to flag suspicious transactions. We lobbied for stronger legal protections. Ellen joined me as co-director. Dorothy Sawyer, once she'd fully recovered, became our most passionate volunteer. We spoke at senior centers throughout Texas, sharing our stories, teaching others how to protect themselves. The case led to legislative changes. Texas passed new laws making it harder to abuse power of attorney. Facilities like Pinewood faced stricter oversight. Requirements for medical documentation in commitment proceedings were strengthened. It wasn't enough to prevent all abuse, but it was a start. I spoke at a senior center in Austin 6 months after the trial ended. About 100 people attended, sitting in folding chairs in the community room. I told them my story, holding nothing back. The pain, the fear, the betrayal, and ultimately, the victory. When I finished the core narrative, I looked out at their faces. Some were crying, others looked angry or frightened. All of them were listening. I want you to understand something important, I said. Being kind and trusting doesn't mean being naive. Loving your family doesn't mean giving them unlimited access to your life and assets. I nearly lost everything, including my freedom, because I confused love with blind trust. I paused, making sure they heard every word. Protect yourself. Ask questions about every document before you sign it. Keep copies of everything. Maintain your own bank accounts and check them regularly. Stay connected with friends outside your immediate family. If something feels wrong, trust that instinct. You have the right to your own autonomy, your own money, and your own decisions for as long as you live. Don't let anyone take that from you. Not even your own children. The audience applauded. Several people came up afterward to thank me, to share their own concerns about family members, to ask for advice. I gave them information about Elder Watch, about resources available, about warning signs to watch for. That evening, I stood in my kitchen in Austin, the same kitchen where I'd fallen 9 months ago and started this nightmare. Sunlight streamed through the windows. I was making coffee, planning my day. Lunch with Ellen, who'd become one of my closest friends. A meeting with a state senator about proposed legislation in the afternoon. Tomorrow, another speaking engagement at a senior center in San Antonio. I thought about Timothy sometimes. Not with hatred, but with sadness for the person he'd chosen to become. The son I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone capable of terrible things. I'd loved him, and he'd betrayed that love in the worst possible way. That would always hurt. But I'd survived. More than survived. I'd fought back against impossible odds. I'd exposed a massive criminal operation. I'd saved other people from the same fate. And now, I was using my experience to help protect countless others. At 67 years old, I had a new purpose. The scared, confused woman who'd fled into the night 12 days into her nightmare was gone. In her place was someone stronger, angrier, more determined. Someone who'd looked into the darkness and refused to be consumed by it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I was making a difference. I was taking the worst thing that had ever happened to me and using it to create something meaningful. And that, I realized as I sipped my coffee and watched the morning light fill my kitchen, was the best revenge of all. They'd tried to erase me, to lock me away and take everything I'd built. Instead, I'd become more visible, more purposeful, more myself than I'd ever been. I'd won. Not just in court, but in every way that mattered. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever felt like something was wrong in a relationship with a family member or trusted friend, but dismissed your own instincts because you felt like you should trust them? How do you balance trust and protection when it comes to the people closest to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these important stories. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future stories about resilience, justice, and overcoming the impossible. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear it, especially elderly family members or friends who could benefit from understanding the warning signs of financial exploitation. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, but these conversations matter. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember that it's never too late to fight back. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.